cricket world. Now the rules seem coming.
Welcome to the Caribbean Cricket Podcast, your one-stop shop for all things West Indies cricket. By the fans, for the fans. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Caribbean Cricket Podcast. And would you believe it? back from his 80 days around the world. I don't know where he's been this time, but Santoki is finally back on the show. I've been having to record episode after episode, but Santoki hit me up. He said, I'm back. Back in the UK. How you doing, Santoki?
Yeah, Mash. I'm back. I know how it felt now. I know how you felt staying up at 3 a.m. to watch the cricket because I'm fighting a jet lag, but I'm here, back. I'm returning a Caribbean Cricket Podcast. And Mash, I'm looking forward to this episode. The regional cricket, the regional season, 4-day regional season is underway. For those of you who haven't already, check out Mash's review of the first 2 rounds on this channel. Unfortunately, Guyana Harpy Eagles are down bad at the moment, so I don't know if I'll be jumping on any reviews anytime soon. But, you know, Mash, we've got a special guest, a returning guest. Long-time viewers of the podcast would have remembered he appeared about 2 years ago to talk about the art of selection in cricket. We've now got him on in his new capacity as Cricket West Indies Director of Cricket. So, Mash, without further ado, do you want to introduce our returning guest?
I do indeed, and he's backstage at the moment, but when you mentioned 4-day cricket, I know he was smiling secretly because Windward Islands are way up. They're way up right now, destroying what they destroyed Jamaica, and then they just destroyed Guyana. Was it no? Who they beat next? Oh, Barbados. They beat Barbados in the second game. So yeah, Windward Islands are up, and deservedly so, to be fair. But as you said, Santoki, we're delighted to have Miles Bascombe back on the show. This time he returns in the guise of Director of Cricket. For those of you who are keen listeners, observers of the Caribbean Cricket Podcast, we've spoken actually in quite a lot of depth about some of the implementations that Miles has already overseen, particularly on the domestic scene within West Indies cricket. So we're excited to kind of, chop it up and kind of deep dive on his role, the kind of strategic overlook that he's got as Director of Cricket and where West Indies cricket may well go over the next few years. So without any further ado, let us bring Miles onto the show. Welcome, Miles. How you doing?
Pretty good. Thanks for having me, guys.
Excellent stuff. Excellent stuff. Glad to have you on. Glad to, get into it and talk about cricket in the region and obviously in your kind of remit as a Director of Cricket. And you know what, Miles, like when Kishore came on the show, we kind of gave the premise for that show as 100 days in office. I don't know if it's quite 100 days for you yet, but first things first, if just as a general overview, how would you reflect on your first few months or so in role as Director of Cricket?
It's been pretty good. I think I came in at a very interesting time in terms of where the company was. It was pretty much at the end of a 4-year cycle. And as you know, that the cricket world runs on 4-year cycles. So I got in just about, at the start of a 4-year cycle. So it was really a good time to look at things in a very holistic way and, really get into some strategic planning. And it was really good to get in at the start so that I could have, made my input and start to lay some groundwork.
When you first took the role, because I'm always intrigued about, and we could look at any kind of big organization in the business world or globally, whatever it might be, but something like Cricket West Indies, where you have to oversee different cricket territories. I often say that what might be a Director of Cricket role in one of the other full member nations doesn't quite translate as easily and as well when you look at it in the context of West Indies cricket and the kind of geographical makeup of what makes West Indies cricket or cricket West Indies. Now, when you first stepped into the role, how do you go about approaching a role that huge? Because yes, you can sit down and you can strategize, but how do you even begin to break everything down? I mean, obviously you've done previous work with the Windward Islands cricket board, so you've got experience there of working strategically within one territorial board, but how do you do it across all of those territories?
Well, the beauty about the Windwards, you know, as I've said, it's that it is pretty much it's pretty much a microcosm of West Indies cricket, because it's 4 territories separated by water, all sovereign nations. So it is nowhere near the scale of West Indies, but it's very similar in terms of those challenges.
You go on, Mesh.
Sorry, no, it's fine, Santo. Go on.
Yeah, so Miles, let's go. So you were appointed August the 1st, and Super 50 took place in October. A big talking point, a lot of questions we had when we announced you were coming on the show was about the point system in Super 50. So there were new bonus points given for dot ball percentages, runs scored in the power play. Was that something which was your idea that you brought into the role, or was it something Cricket West Indies were planning? And what was the rationale and thinking behind that implementation?
Okay, well, the point system was born from discussions between me and the white ball head coach. He obviously, we recognize that we have been very poor in one-day cricket, and you know the reasons were obvious. We soaking up too many dot balls in the middle order, not taking wickets early. It was well documented, and he developed some KPIs for his team, and what he wanted us to be able to do is, you know, try to get that down, because what the issue that we have had is that the players would come to the West Indies team and just trying to play this style of cricket, which, as you know, doesn't translate well to international performances. So he wanted us to get it down to the regional level so that players coming into the Super 50 tournament would be attempting to play that brand of cricket. So the point system was really intended to be an incentive system around those performance indicators, those best practices that we wanted to see in the West Indies senior one-day international team. We wanted to find a way to put incentives, you know, to get the players to actually play that brand of cricket. We know that generally you come to a tournament, you come to win. And so we wanted a point system that would help to get you there at the same. So you have that focus on winning, but you want to win by playing this type of cricket, right? It was a little bit late in terms of when we were able, because ideally you want that to get to the players in training ahead of the tournament, and they train all the way up to the Super 50, working on playing that brand of cricket, and then they come into the tournament trying to execute. But we felt that it was important that we at least made a start, and we that way, because during the tournament as well, which I think is worth mentioning, the head coach actually made a presentation to the players, and that was done alongside his analysts, who laid out what the West Indies cricket team did in comparison to all of the other international teams that are ahead of us, right? And where they performed on those same key performance indicators. And, you know, that laid the foundation for what the head coach was trying to get. So we wanted the players to understand why we implemented the bonus system, and that went a long way. Funny enough, after that presentation, I think, even though the head coach would have met with the head coach of all the franchise teams, I think after that presentation, I was actually there in the room when it was done, and you know, it was quite clear that the message had gotten across to quite a few players, and that was very heartening to see.
So it's still early stages in the long-term rebuild of the 50 over West Indies side. But for viewers, could you sort of explain, when you did meet with Darren Sammy, what was the vision he presented long-term? What was the specifics of this brand of cricket he wants to implement going forward for the next few years in our 50 over setup?
Well, again, it was very much around those areas where we have fallen short, and you see it in the point system. It's high dot ball percentages. We needed to get those. We needed to get those down. We needed to have opening batsmen who would try to maximize the power play, and do that in a way that doesn't cost the team, you know, a lot of wickets up front. And we wanted to be able to rotate the strike well through the middle overs. We wanted batsmen who got starts to push on and try to get those big match-defining scores, because we've found that, you know, we get to 80, we've done a pretty good rebuilding job in the middle, and then when it's time to really push on and drive home the advantage, that we have not been able to do that, you know, with the level of consistency that we would like to. And then similarly, in the bowling, we wanted a focus on bowling out teams, right? I think what we have seen is that we have settled a lot trying to restrict teams bowling 50 overs. And the coach said that that is not the mindset that he wants for his bowling unit. He wants a bowling unit that is looking to bowl, to take 10 wickets and bowl out teams. So that was along the lines of the discussions that we had, and then we brainstormed about how we can achieve that at the regional level, so that players are. Oh, there was another focus on roles, right? Which was also a key part of the discussion, so that players are aware of, you know, what is expected of you as an opening batsman, what is expected of you as a middle order batsman, and not just the outcomes in terms of averages and so on, also the competencies, you know, rotating the strike, using your feet to spin, sweeping, innovation. So we discussed all of those things, and that is what led to the implementation of the bonus point system in the Super 50.
And as Santoki says, it's early days. I think for sure in the Super 50, one of the things I noticed across the whole tournament was far more intent in the power play, more than I usually saw in previous editions of the Super 50. So you could tell that at least some elements of it was making its way through to the franchises. Obviously, there was points for taking wickets up front as well, trying to be a bit more aggressive in field settings and placements in terms of trying to take wickets up front. Obviously, points for hundreds as well, and so on and so forth. I think one of the things that can often hold us back, though, in the region, Miles, is that often people want short-term results. They may not look at it as a long-term plan. In terms, like, so in an ideal world, I guess you would say that there is a World Cup in 2027, and really and truly, for this to embed and have any kind of real meaning, we have to look at it as more than just what happened in 2023 Super 50 and look at every edition going forward from here, in terms of embedding that approach. How are there further steps, though, that can be taken? Because again, it kind of goes back to that point where you can embed it at the tournament itself, but in an ideal world, every nation or territory should be taking it back to their domestic club competition. So Jamaica is Senior Cup, for example. They should be trying to, in an ideal world, replicate that. Has that been part of the discussion as well?
Yes, definitely. So we want to take it one step back at a time. So we want it to be implemented at the franchise level. So as I mentioned, ideally, the players would have been working at their roles, they would have had these discussions with the franchise head coach. For example, opening batsman, you are going to take the attack to the bowlers in the power play, and your training sessions, months leading up to the Super 50 would be tailored to ensure that you have enough opportunity to practice the skills that would allow you to be able to fulfill that role, right? And that would happen with every single player according to their respective roles. So that is definitely where we want to go. So that discussion with the coaches, as I mentioned, the head coach would have had that discussion with the franchise head coaches. So it's now about getting them to implement that within their training programs, providing the support for them as necessary, where they would need additional support to ensure that they could implement that within the franchise system as part of the lead up to the next Super 50.
And Mash talked at the top of the show about what a tough job it is in West Indies because of the nature of different territories. Obviously, you said working in win-wins, you've had experience of that on a smaller level. Sort of what strategies and plans do you have to build a cohesive approach across franchises and ensure everyone's essentially working from the same page?
Well, the key would be communication. To have those plans laid out as clearly as possible, having every coach understanding what their part is, what their role is in the overall scheme of things, and communicating those roles and responsibilities clearly. And again, as I mentioned, offering support as it is needed to ensure that they have everything they need to actually execute those plans. But that I think is the primary deficiency that we've recognized in our system, that many times it's just that people don't know and they haven't been communicated with. So we are trying to improve on that across the board: communication with players, communication with coaches and territorial boards. Still a long way to go, but I do see some light at the end of the tunnel where that is concerned.
Outside of Super 50, what are some of the other areas? I mean, we've got some that we want to discuss with you, but I'm just intrigued to see what you say. What are some of the other areas that, I guess, let's say in year one and then maybe year 2, 3, whatever it might be, what are some of the areas that you want primary focus on in terms of, I guess, short-term gains, and then your medium term, and then your long term? So I know it's still early in your tenure, so it's a hard question in some senses, but what other things have you identified across the region when you say we need to get better at X, we need to get better at Y?
I think that what I'm trying to do, and what we have been trying to do, is get alignment, right? I think that has been our main focus in the short term. Because obviously it is very difficult to focus on one area and expect things to move forward, because the entire system is integrated, right? So a reason why teams may not have been able to execute as well as they would have liked to in the Super 50 may be an issue of pitches, right? And so we have to go back. So if you want to focus on that game plan, it's difficult to focus on it without addressing pitches, right? And that is what I've found so far, that it's very difficult to try to focus on one area without addressing the other areas that affect whether or not you can execute that particular area of focus. So you have to burn the candle pretty much. It's war on all fronts, if you want to put it that way. Right, we have to attack every area and keep looking for incremental improvements, in each of these areas, and set targets and try to get there. And I expect to see things moving forward. So it's pretty much, the focus is on everything. We are working on pitches. The good thing is that the World Cup has been a really good catalyst in terms of getting some much needed work done on facilities. We currently have a number of pitches being relayed across the region. So we know that is going to be a legacy of the World Cup, that we're going to have facilities in far better shape, you know, than they have been for the last 10 or so years, or probably even more than that. So that is one area. We know that we need to improve our coaching methods. And again, a lot of it has to do with communication of best practice and ensuring that there is alignment in terms of brand of play, and that there is alignment in terms of the overall objective, right? Because we don't want one coach going all out to win, you know, win at all costs, when we are really trying to develop world-class elite cricketers for West Indies team. And we are saying that if we take care of the cricketers, if we have that individual development of the players, then, you know, the trophies and so on will take care of themselves, right? And then we're also trying to create a very much performance-based system right across the board. So the increases in prize monies, all of that is a part of, you know, incentivizing players, you know, to perform well. And when I say perform, again, that is another area that we have to define for them what performance means. It's not necessarily who gets the most runs or who gets the most wickets. It's are you able to meet these performance indicators? Are you able to bring down your dot ball percentage? Are you able to score off spinners and pacers? Are you able to maximize the power play if you're an opener, right? So those are the areas that, as I said, it's war on all fronts, but we need to ensure that there is clarity across the system, so that everybody knows what their role is, and, you know, how they help us to achieve the goals that we want to.
If I just pivot back to pitches for a second. So I know, for example, like Arnos Vale, the pitch is being relayed there as an example of a ground which is experiencing extensive work ahead of the World Cup. But we often hear, and we've said it on the show ourselves, the pitches aren't good enough, the pitches aren't good enough. Now, with the greatest of respects, neither myself or Santoki are out in the Caribbean to give the specifics about why the pitches aren't good enough, or what is it specifically about them that makes them not good enough. Some play better than others. We know that St. Lucia tends to be one of the quickest in the region in terms of helping pace and bounce and the quicker bowlers. But in a nutshell, from your perspective, what exactly is the problem with the pitches? I don't know how much you can go into that, but is it the nature of curation? Do we need to upskill the skill set in terms of pitch curation? Is it about is it as deep as the type of soil that we've got? Like, what's the actual issue that makes so many of our pitches play low and slow and uneven bounce and so on, variable bounce, sorry, and so on and so forth?
Okay, so it's what we've discovered recently is that many of our pitches have been laid with a poor foundation. They've been built effectively in I don't want to say the wrong way, because probably at the time they were built, that was the prevailing way that it was done. So we have a lot of pitches, like the one in St. Vincent, for example, which was actually relayed quite recently. But it was relayed with about 4 feet of clay. And so what the science is telling us now is that you really, it's very difficult for you to control what happens at the top when you have 4 feet of clay that you don't know how much water is being retained. So you could very well have a soft subsurface. So that pitch in St. Vincent, I would use that one as an example. So that has been relayed now using best practice. So there is a layer of gravel and then a layer of sand to ensure that there is good drainage. And then you have only 8 inches of clay. So if you compare that to what was previously 4 feet of clay, you can tell that is a significant difference in terms of construction. So we have recognized that at a few facilities that was the same issue at CCG, right at the Coolidge Cricket Ground at the headquarters here. It may not have been as many as 4 feet of clay, but definitely far more than was necessary and far more that is than what is current best practice. So that is one aspect of it. Another aspect of it is certainly expertise in terms of curation. It is a science, and in many cases we do not have scientists at the helm of the ground staff, and that is something that we definitely would seek to address as well. In fact, in March, ahead of the preparation period leading into the World Cup, there would be a team heading around to every territory that will be hosting the World Cup, doing some training in curation, and we plan to follow that up as well. So we want to ensure that we do have the expertise, and we do provide the education to the personnel around the region, so that we can start to see not only the infrastructure work, but better practices in terms of maintenance and so on of these pitches.
Yeah, and just going back to where you talked about in terms of players knowing their roles and sort of how they perform in sides. One thing about the franchise system, Territorial one at the moment, is sides tend to pick players from their own region. So sorry, Guyana will, for instance, in the draft, they'll pick 2 Guyanese players, for instance. We've seen this season Jeremy Solizano move to Windward Islands and start to rebuild his confidence after not being picked for Trinidad and Tobago. As director of cricket, is that something you want to see more of and try to implement that more players moving around franchises, just so players have great opportunities to know their role in sides and develop that aspect of their game?
Well, it's heartening to see. And I think that it provides a really good opportunity for teams when they can bring in players who would help to bolster their ranks. But in some cases, I wouldn't say that it should be mandatory, because if you can find players of the caliber that you want in your territory, then I don't think that you should be mandated to get 2 players from outside just for the sake of getting them. Because I think at one point that was the case, and then you found that those players were brought in, and then they were pretty much relegated to the bench for the majority of the season. So where it benefits the team, I think that it is a good way to go. Now that we have expanded both tournaments, and we've added the academy and CCC, it gives a lot of fringe players, opportunities to get into squads, and I think that will certainly help in terms of getting opportunities for the best players, and I think we'll definitely see the benefits of that going forward.
Just looking at you've mentioned West Indies Academy and CCC. In terms of youth development, I think a lot of people, rightly so, I would say, are excited by some of the strides the West Indies Academy setup has certainly made in the last 18 months. Okay, we've seen the series against Ireland recently. They'll be in Ireland again, I think, in May for the return series. We saw their very good performances at the end of the Headley Week series last year. Obviously, they're in the 4-day championship this year. They've already won 1 game. I know they just lost to Trinidad, but they've already won 1 game. How do you see youth development going forward? And the reason why I ask you that, Miles, is I'll give you 2 things that people often lament about cricket development in the region, which I think the West Indies Academy has helped offset to some regards. One, we tend to have a talented crop of under-19 players. We've just seen our under-19 team come 5th in the World Cup, and we look like we've got at least 5 to 6, 7 very talented players within that cohort of under-19s. when they then come through these under-19s, now obviously the academy exists, but once they then leave the academy, there still seems to be, in some territories more than others, what do I want to say here? Not enough pace, I guess, given in fast-tracking some of these youth through to give them developmental opportunities. Now, we don't have across the region an under-23s tournament. We have our first-class championship and we have our Super 50, but we don't. We've got the Rising Stars under 19s, under 17s, under 15, but we don't really have a bridging competition between under 19s to our first class championships. Now, you may say that the real resources aren't there for that, but in terms of development, would it be fair to say something slightly missing or not aligned, because that's the word we've used earlier, in terms of youth development across the whole region?
Yes, right there with you, and that is something that I'm quite passionate about, that actual area between 19 and 23. So yes, the academy does play a huge role in terms of taking, those elite under 19 players and, giving them the opportunity. And the intention for the academy is that we upskill those players, they get some first class experience now that we've added them to the West Indies Championship. And then it makes it all that easier for them to transition into their franchise team, or a franchise team, if not the one in their territory. But again, we have only contracted 15 of those players. If you think of 6 times 15 that may have come through our under 19 tournament, and we have only contracted 15, you still have another 75 or so of them. Many of them who are talented. And so we definitely have to find a way to bridge that gap. And even though resources may be constrained, I think that across the board, we have recognized the need for under 23 program. In fact, we planned for a tournament this year, but given the World Cup, given all of the work that has to be done on facilities and the packed schedule that we have in the back end of the year, actually having a tournament will prove difficult. And in some sense, I think it may actually be an opportunity, because it means then that we can have under 23 programs in each territory. So we can start something this year that could culminate in a tournament next year, right? And I think that is likely to be the route that we would go. But it has been recognized, and I think it's universally understood that area. I know for sure Vice President Bassarat, he is one person who has been a real champion for having under 23 program. As you know, Trinidad has a program that has been going well so far. So definitely it's something that is coming. There will be some level of an under 23 program, if not at CWI level, assisted by CWI and implemented within the territories this year.
And we also have combined campuses and colleges taking part in the four-day regional season this year. We get a lot of questions about CCC. So could you sort of explain what's the mandate for CCC and what are the long-term plans around using it to develop players in relation to Cricket West Indies relations with the University of West Indies and everything that entails?
Okay, well, as a product of CCC myself, I remember that it was a really good opportunity for me to be able to play and study. So we think that is something we definitely want to encourage. We would hate for it to feel like a choice that it's either academics or cricket. I remember, and I hope this person wouldn't mind me using their name, but I remember at under 15s, there was a youngster, Tishan Maraj, who was actually captain of the West Indies under 15 team. I think that team went to a World Cup and did reasonably well. And a very good batsman, and I think he is now a doctor, but I think we lost him. I don't think he played much cricket beyond probably under 19s. So, you know, it would be a shame if we are to lose cricketers to academics only because, you know, there isn't an avenue for them to actually do both. So that is a key part of what we want to achieve through the CCC program, to ensure that there's an avenue for, you know, our academically inclined players to be able to have access to the sport at this high level, at the list A and first class level. You know, and the CCC program has proven that they can produce world-class elite cricketers. I mean, Ravman Powell is probably the prime example, who came through that CCC program. And I think that was his first entry point into senior cricket, right? So we have seen that they can compete because they've won the Super 50 previously, right? And we have seen that they can produce world-class players, and the opportunity to have our brightest, you know, cricketers, our academically inclined players have that opportunity in our, well, from my position, I think it's a no-brainer in terms of having them involved in our competitions and supporting that program.
I was just wondering off the back of that, funnily enough, because I was thinking about the players who will graduate from this under 19 World Cup cohort, who are possibly 18, maybe not the oldest ones, but someone, I don't know, someone like, let's take someone like a Jordan Johnson. Now, Jordan Johnson, as it is part of the West Indies Academy anyway, but there will be some players who may be part of the under 19 World Cup, and I just wonder, I'm not saying that Cricket West Indies should do this or are considering it, but if there's a notion to think that some of the talented players we encourage to go to UE and say, you know what, go and study, even if it's not something you really wanted to do, but go study, I don't know, a sports science degree or whatever it might be, as a way to keep you still playing cricket in the meantime. Do you get where I'm coming from with that? I don't know if that's something we could do, or if that's a way forward for some of these talented youngsters.
Well, definitely. It's something that quite a few players have benefited from, including myself. I actually went to UE on scholarship. And I mean, technically it was a Sir Arthur Lewis Award, but it was understood that it was on the back of my potential as a cricketer. So that was an initiative that I think Sir Hilary Beckles pioneered when he was at Cave Hill. So hopefully what we have tried to do is what we want to do is to enter into an MOU with the University of West Indies around the CCC program, so that program has some, you know, it has some longevity. It's not a case that they could be in this year and out next year. So we want to give them, you know, some confidence that this program, you know, it has the support of CWI, you know, and hopefully that would start to allow them to go back down that road where they look for cricketers. You know, you look for talented cricketers and you offer them scholarships. You have them come in, do their academics, and you know, be a part of a high performance cricket program. So that is definitely something that we would continue to discuss with the University of the West Indies.
Excellent stuff. So moving on to the A team, we've seen some excellent A team results, as well as the West Indies Academy. We've seen some excellent performances, results for the A team in the last year, 18 months or so, and even the recent tour to South Africa. I often say that I think Santoki and I recorded an episode where we said, well, actually, if people actually look at it properly, it was no coincidence that the team that went on to perform in Australia, many of them were actually in that A-team tour in South Africa. So it wasn't like we selected a random set of players to go to Australia. They had technically been prepped appropriately prior to going to Australia. Are there any kind of hopes and wishes for future engagements of A-team cricket vis-a-vis developing the players? And also, how do you envisage using the A-team? So, for example, in South Africa, I mean, Kevlon was initially scheduled to go, and obviously there was a visa issue. Then Jordan flew out over there. We had some experienced senior players there. Kavem Hodge got his chance over there. Josh obviously captained the side. So we've had a mixture of established test players, players who are on the fringes, who we think are coming into the test side, and then some talented youngsters. How do you envisage using the A-team going forward? And are there plans to try and get some more tours out there?
Oh, definitely. What we want to have is at least one home and one away series every year. So that is what we are working towards. We actually have the reciprocal tour of South Africa coming back to the West Indies, and that series will be played alongside the test series. So both their test team and their A team would be in the region at the same time, and we will use the A team strategically, just the way you laid out. So there may be some senior players who may need, some competition at that level that is above our first class level, just to get them back into form. We will have some players who we want to expose to that level of cricket. Some players who are on the fringes of the senior team, that we want to really see whether or not they have what it takes to make the step up. And I think that tour to South Africa was a very good example. Obviously, we knew that the conditions in South Africa were as close as you would get to Australia without actually being in Australia. So we knew that it would be a good guide, and obviously the competition in South Africa was quite good because they played quite a few experienced players who would have had test experience. And so that is exactly how we want to use the A team strategically, to look at players who may be on similar levels, to see if we can find another way to discern who might be ahead in terms of a depth chart, and to give some players, that opportunity to find some form, and others the opportunity to see whether or not they have what it takes to make the step up to the next level. So that is how we intend to use it. We intend to use it going forward quite as strategically as we could, in terms of the opposition that we can find, and exposing our players to other conditions, which is another key factor. Until we can find pace and bounce in our wickets outside of St. Lucia, it's always a good opportunity for us to, and then even in terms of spin, getting good quality spin in the subcontinent and so on, that will be quite useful. So that is exactly how we intend to use it, very strategically, so that we try to expose as many players as we can, and keep giving ourselves options in terms of the next wave of players, and ensure that persons have some experience, even if they have not made it all the way into a test team, but they at least have some confidence that they can go onto foreign soil in foreign conditions and find a way to churn out performances.
And earlier, or last month, at the beginning of the year, a strategic decision was announced. There would be a review into the selection process and the selection panels regarding the team. Several selectors didn't have their contracts renewed, and it was announced there would be a review process. What is the time frame on that review process, and how are things going in that regard?
Okay, well, what we want to do is definitely by the end of June, we want to be able to have a new process in place. That is the latest possible date, right? Whatever that looks like. We have not done the review as yet, but we have felt and we have been told in certain quarters that there is still some dissatisfaction with the selection process. Also, we have to look at our system and what the needs are and determine whether or not the current framework is the best for our situation, right? As you mentioned, we are separated by water. We have cricket that is, and even that is putting it quite simply, right? Because even if you look at a territory like Guyana, right, you have cricket being played in 3 territories, right? And it's a massive land mass, right? So even if there is one person in Guyana who is a selector, that person can't possibly have eyes on all the talent in Guyana. So we do recognize that there is a need for a very good scouting network. That is definitely one area that would be discussed. And while we have activated scouts when we have West Indies Championship or Super 50 taking place, it would still be useful to have more eyes and more players all year round. So that is one area that we definitely would have to look at. And I'm really looking forward to that review. And yes, by the end of June, I expect that we would have that is the latest date, potentially earlier than that, but definitely by the end of June, we would have completed that review and put forward a recommendation for a new system, if you want to call it that.
So when it comes to July and Machel wants to put his application in to be a selector, does he just is there a contact email for you?
The same way he got me to come on, he can reach out to me.
Don't worry, Santoki. I recorded that one, Santoki. Don't worry.
But I would warn him. I would warn him that it is not the easiest job in the world.
Listen, we're close to wrapping this episode up, Miles, but it is imperative that we talk about women's cricket as well. And again, we've seen some positive performances. It's almost been forgotten what Hayley Matthews and the side did at the back end of the year against Australia. So the men's senior side went on to mimic exactly what the women effectively had done by winning a game that no one expected them to win in Australia. Where we've started with the first cohort of the women in the academy for them as well, the 15 names in the academy. So where are things that, from your perspective, vis-a-vis women's cricket? I know in the recently announced MOU with WIPA, there was an indication to make further steps to professionalize the approach around women's cricket in the region. So just where are things at vis-a-vis women's cricket?
Okay, so the first thing I'd say on that is the new head coach, Shane Dietz. He has come in and pretty much hit the ground running. And I would say that probably the head coach's aspect of my job has been quite a relief so far. I think everybody is quite aware. I just wanted to put that out there that those coaches they're all very aware of what they want to get done, and they're very clear on what they need, and they certainly make my life quite easy. And to get back to the women's game, we have announced that by 2027 we expect parity in terms of match fees. So that certainly, I hope, would be good news. But what we want to do, and where I would be charged, is to ensure that there is support for the women players. What we have recognized and what we have been told, because during the CPL, we actually had a player summit where we sat with men and women, just to work out what are the, what factors are really affecting them and preventing them from getting to where they want to go in terms of their skill development. And one of the things that we realized was that the support in territory for the women was not where we would like it to be. So that is definitely one of the things that I have for immediate attention, to ensure that there is support for these players when they get back into their territories, because we see the gains when they come to camps, right? We see the gains, and then they go back to their territories. If they can't get the support that they need, then those gains would soon be lost. So there would be that. We also announced as part of the MOU that from October 2024, we want to start to build out the professional franchise, women's franchise. We would start with up to 6 players. So there would be a performance threshold that you must meet, and up to 6 players can be contracted by the franchise, right? So that is outside of senior West Indies contracted players, outside of the 15 contracted academy players. You can have up to 6 senior female players contracted by territory, right? And of course, we will put the support around those. We do have a women's under-19 program, women's under-19 tournament. And next year, we want to deepen the pathway a little bit further, because the earlier we can get to the talent, we definitely will be able to get better returns. So we want to have an under-15 female tournament next year, which means that in this year, we have to start to lay the groundwork to ensure that we have, we actually have teams for that tournament. And we are going to go along those lines. We are definitely going to have to do some work in terms of grassroots, in terms of getting young ladies interested in the game. We are hoping that those announcements of parity in pay, would be a huge incentive, and that message will be spread across the region, and parents and young women would find that quite attractive, and that would be, that would probably give us the first wave, hopefully, and then the grassroots program that we would eventually put into place, would make it very easy to attract these young ladies to the game. So we're definitely working on professionalizing the women's game, and pretty much all of what we do would be across the board, right? So it's no longer well, even though I say the men's game and the women's game, we no longer look at it as separate games. It's one cricket system where men and women play, and whatever resources that we put in, we want to put it in across the board, so that there is benefits to men and women.
It's an excellent response there, Miles. I was going to hand over to Santoki to wrap, but I just wanted to run one last thing by you before we just close this off. One thing that I've always been perplexed about, Miles, is that territories don't tour one another. And I've never... I don't know where you stand on it, but what's to stop? Because that, to me, doesn't need a Cricket West Indies mandate for territories to do it. You can encourage it, of course, but why doesn't Jamaica, I know Jamaica's the furthest away, but why don't they tour Barbados? Obviously, Trinidad and Guyana, I think, have done bilaterals before. They're close by, but I don't quite understand. Obviously, within the Windward and the Leewards, they have their inter-island tournament, so maybe you could say that counts in the context of the islands, but we don't see a lot of bilateral series within the territories, and it doesn't quite make sense to me why that doesn't happen more often.
Well, as someone who was at the at one of the territorial boards, I think the biggest factor there would be finance, right? The cost of an endeavor like that, I think, is a little bit prohibitive. But I do think that there are creative ways of getting around that. For example, you would expect that an agreement like that would be reciprocal. So one team comes one year and another team goes the other way the next year, and that way, you effectively split the cost over 2 years, which makes it a little bit more manageable. But it is something that we have discussed. Funny enough, relating to the same under 23 program, that may be one way to go in terms of a start this year. So that is something that we have discussed, and something we definitely encourage. It takes a lot of forward planning really to execute that, and I think that is one of the areas that we have not been great in terms of at the territorial board level. That a lot of our planning still hinges a lot on where the major regional tournaments are. So you would see activities ramp up just before Super 50 or just before West Indies Championship, as opposed to having a full year plan, right? And if you start to look at it that way, which is what we are going to be encouraging, then you would realize, for example, at the end of the West Indies Championship, you have probably about 5 months before the end of the contract period. So you have contracted franchise players. You have 5 months there. That is a lot of time. So you have time for skill development, you have time for strength and conditioning, and you certainly have time. A bilateral tour might be exactly what you need close to the end of that contract period to be able to make your final decisions on which players you keep, and if you want to move on from a few. But definitely that competition will certainly help, and the movement of players across the territories will definitely help in getting them to be acclimatized to the different conditions, and playing some very competitive cricket with a little less pressure of a regional tournament. Give you that opportunity to actually try to execute the skills that you have learned, having your focus on executing the skills as opposed to performing for the team to win or performing to ensure that you get the best possible retainer contract, right? So you do need those opportunities as well. So something we definitely would encourage.
Sure.
Miles, thank you so much for coming on. I think it was really great that you talked about having one cricket system. I think what's really come through in this talk is about your aims to develop consistency across men's, women's, youth cricket in terms of performance and development. And obviously, all of us here in this podcast want to see the best for West Indies cricket. So we're looking forward to seeing your next steps and how sort of everything develops. So once again, thank you so much for giving up some of your evening and coming on the show.
Oh, definitely. I'm a fan, first of all. So, I'm there for almost every cuss out. Even when I'm the one at the receiving end. But that's that's okay. Over the next few months, I think we have quite a lot happening. Even outside of the World Cup, quite a lot of key decisions will be made. So I definitely look forward to when those decisions have been made, and a lot of the things that are still quite conceptual now have been concretized, and I could come back and actually have a fulsome discussion on exactly why things have been done a certain way. I've spoken about communication and how we are trying to really put a huge emphasis on communication, and that also includes interviews like this, where we really try to get the message out, because I think it's important that people understand what it is that we are that we are trying to do, and what is behind some of the decision, what is the thinking behind some of the decisions that you might see the headline and you might read the article, but I think it's important that people know what the thinking is behind these decisions. And I think by and large, you and them would see that there is something happening. It's calculated. It's part of a broad strategy, and there is a plan. All right, and I think it's key that people know that there is actually a plan there.
I cannot disagree, Miles. As I said, when we got in touch and I said it'd be good for you to come on the show, I think fundamentally, just to echo what you say, as a platform, talking about the Caribbean Cricket Podcast here, I just feel that it's important we offer an opportunity for stakeholders to just come on and just explain the plan. And I'm sure in the comments, you're still going to get people cussing you.
Comes with the territory.
But
usually
at least you're transparent.
I tell people that I've already done the hardest job there is in West Indies cricket, and that was being a selector. So this one has a heavier workload, but it's nowhere near as hard as being a selector.
I hear that completely. But all that said, as Santoki's indicated, I'm ready for the role. So it's all good. It's all good all the same. But as Santoki says, Miles, thank you so much for coming on. For those who are about to, when I upload this, listen to the show, thank you for listening. Remember to like, share, subscribe to Caribbean Cricket Podcast. As we've always said on this channel, we will always try and secure transparent conversations with the stakeholders of West Indies cricket. And I think it just helps everybody understand that everyone's actually just trying to pull in the same direction. It may be slow at times, it may be excellent at times, it may be bad at times, but fundamentally everybody's trying to pull in the same direction for the betterment of West Indies cricket. So Miles, thank you once more for coming on. I'm sure you'll be back again when some more news breaks centrally from Cricket West Indies. But thank you so much for coming on the show.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
No worries. Ladies and gents, that's been another episode of the Caribbean Cricket Podcast. Thank you and good night.
We rule the cricket world. Now the rule seems coming.
Welcome to the Caribbean Cricket Podcast, your one-stop shop for all things West Indies cricket. By the fans, for the fans.